All right, we're going to dive deep into the logic behind some of the most debated topics in Christian theology, and we're going to do it through the lens of R.C. Sproul's teaching. The goal here isn't just to see what's believed, but to understand the logical chain of why it's believed. Now, if you've ever waded into these waters, you've almost certainly seen this before: TULIP. It's the classic go-to acronym for the 5 points of Calvinism, a system of thought that really hones in on God's sovereignty in salvation. It's a handy way to frame the whole discussion.
But here's the real question we're going to explore today. What if this famous memory aid, as helpful as it seems, actually creates more confusion than it clears up? What if the words themselves kind of get in the way of the ideas they're trying to explain?
So, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start by looking beyond that TULIP acrostic. Then we'll really get into the weeds on the first and honestly most critical point, what Sproul called radical corruption. From there, we'll look at the biblical case for being dead, not just drowning. We'll unpack the work of rebirth, and finally, we'll clear up what's really meant by effectual grace. You know, as Sproul himself often pointed out, TULIP is a great little memory tool. But the trouble with any acrostic is that sometimes the best theological word doesn't start with the letter you need. The words that get chosen can be super easy to misunderstand. And that's exactly why we need to look closer at the actual concepts hiding behind them. So let's start with the big one, the T in TULIP, total depravity. Now, according to Sproul, if you can really grasp this one single point, the way it's truly meant, then the rest of the logic just falls into place. It's the absolute linchpin of the entire system. Okay, so this is absolutely crucial. When people hear total depravity, their minds immediately jump to utter depravity, the idea that every person is as absolutely evil as they could possibly be. But that's not it at all. The real concept is what Sproul preferred to call radical corruption. The idea is that sin is total not in its intensity, but in its extent. It affects every part of us, our will, our heart, our mind, right down to the radix, the Latin word for the root of our being. And to show just how powerful this one point is, Sproul used to tell this great story about a college class he was teaching. It was a group of about 25 students. On the first day, he took a quick poll. He asked, "How many of you consider yourselves Calvinists?" And only one hand went up. Just one. So yeah, the room was definitely skeptical. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of diving right into the most controversial topics like predestination, Sproul spent several days just lecturing on one single topic: the Bible's view of human sin and corruption. That's it. And the result was pretty amazing. After that deep dive, he took the poll again, and this time all 25 students raised their hands. Every single one of them agreed that what they had just studied was, in fact, what the Bible teaches about human sin. And this just perfectly captures Sproul's whole point. He believed that once his students really accepted that foundational premise about our human nature, the rest of the debate was basically over before it even started. So, what exactly is that view? Well, let's get into the biblical diagnosis that this whole idea is built on. The argument is that Scripture doesn't just paint a picture of humanity as being sick or in trouble or like a drowning person. It paints a picture of humanity as being spiritually dead. The Apostle Paul, writing in the book of Romans, lays out this just devastating case, and it comes in this rapid-fire succession. First up, there is none righteous, no, not one. I mean, that's an absolute universal statement right there. He keeps going, there is none who seeks after God. Now, this one really challenges the way we often talk about people being seekers. The argument here is that on our own, we don't seek God. We might seek the benefits God can give us, peace, purpose, you name it, but we're actually fugitives from God himself. And finally, there is none who does good. No, not one. Of course, people do things that look good on the outside, but the claim is that if the ultimate standard is perfect action plus a perfect inner motivation of pure love for God, well, then every single thing we do is going to fall short. So, this really leads to 3 different ways of looking at our spiritual condition. A lot of folks see us as being mortally ill. We need medicine, sure, but we can still choose to open our mouths. Or maybe like a drowning man. We need a life preserver, but we can still choose to grab it. But Sproul argued that the biblical diagnosis is way more severe. We're like a dead man. A corpse can't do anything to help itself. It needs someone else to bring it back to life. So, if the problem is spiritual death, what in the world is the solution? Well, this brings us to the divine work of rebirth, or what theologians have a specific word for, regeneration. Regeneration literally just means to generate again. It's the start of a new spiritual life. And the critical point here, just like with our physical birth, is that it's not something we do for ourselves. It's a work that is done to us. It's the move from being spiritually dead to spiritually alive. Now, the technical term for this is monergism. It sounds complex, but just break it down. Mono means one, and erg means work. One worker. The idea is that in the act of regeneration, of making a spiritually dead person alive, there is only one actor, God. And this is so important because it frames the entire thing as an act of pure grace, not an act of human cooperation. And this leads us right to the final piece of this logical chain, and it's maybe the most misunderstood part of the whole TULIP acronym, the I, for irresistible grace. And just like with the T, Sproul argued we really need a better term here. So the common caricature, right, is that irresistible grace means God is dragging people into his kingdom against their will, kicking and screaming the whole way. But that's a total misunderstanding. The idea of effectual grace is that God doesn't violate our will, he transforms our will. He changes our hearts so that a person who had zero desire for Christ now freely and willingly wants him more than anything. As Sproul put it so powerfully, they come because they want to come. This work of regeneration makes Christ seem so desirable, so wonderful, that the renewed heart just rushes to him. It isn't coercion, it's the creation of a brand new, overwhelming desire. Okay, so this brings us to what you could call the $64,000 question. It's the challenge that Sproul would pose to the alternative view. Many believe in something called prevenient grace, which is a grace that goes out to everyone and makes it possible for them to choose Christ. So the logical question is this. Why does one person cooperate with that grace while their next-door neighbor doesn't? I mean, what made the difference? Was the person who said yes somehow a little more righteous, a little more intelligent, maybe more humble, or more aware of their need? And if the answer to any of those is yes, then you have to ask the next, much deeper question. Where did that superior quality, that extra bit of righteousness or intelligence or humility ultimately come from? And that right there is the logical question sitting at the very heart of this entire debate.